Hi there and welcome to Elevator Pitch Economics. In today's video we're going to look at some of the key risk factors behind the increase in obesity, and to do so we're going to use a paper by Cho, Grossman and Saffer from 2003. In this paper the authors have identified three factors in particular which they believe strongly explain the rise in obesity, and these are the increase in the availability of fast food, the decrease in the monetary cost of food, and changes in smoking laws. In previous videos we talked about the neoclassical and behavioural models of obesity, and in this paper they do use inferences from both neoclassical and behavioural models, but most of the inferences actually come from the neoclassical models. And you may remember this chart from a video on neoclassical models of obesity, and basically what it says is that decreases in the price of food lead to increases in the consumption. And what this paper does in particular is it uses that neoclassical model, but it adds on the idea that time is part of the price of food. Now, one thing to bear in mind is time is used for everything. We use time when we obtain, prepare and consume food, we use it in the labour market, and we use it when we do leisure activities. So what happens if you have less time, say because you went into employment? Well, it means you have less time for all other activities. When it comes to your leisure, you have substituted your hours of leisure for hours of work. It means you have less time for leisure and you begin to value it more. And of course, because you're in employment, you have less time to prepare and obtain foods. And as a direct result, your individual demand for fast foods and foods prepared in restaurants will go up. And this is because you have less time or no time to dedicate to food preparation, and you also value your leisure time above spending food on time preparation. An easy way of thinking about it is this. Let's say we have this person, and this person has just started working. So they get home and they have about 2 hours left of their day. Now they can spend that 2 hours preparing food and making something very healthy, and then eating it and doing the dishes. Or they can go to McDonald's, spend about 10 minutes doing that, and then say spend the rest of their day, the 1 hour 50 minutes, watching television and playing PlayStation. Well, in this scenario, it's very likely that they're going to demand fast food instead of doing food preparation. Because in a scenario where they order fast food, they get to spend 1 hour and 50 minutes doing something that they enjoy. They get their leisure time. And one thing that the authors appreciate in particular is that although the monetary cost of a restaurant meal or a fast food meal is higher, the overall cost to an individual's utility is lower. So an individual who's maximizing their utility will order fast food. And if you add more restaurants to a particular area, you actually begin to decrease the cost of food. And this is because things such as travel time and time spent waiting is factored into the price of food. The other risk factor is smoking. And how does smoking affect obesity? Well, there has been legislation introduced to stop people smoking in public places, and this increases the actual full price of smoking because you're increasing the inconvenience associated with smoking. Now, as they were designed to do, the law will stop people from smoking. It will prevent cigarette consumption for some. But of course, some people will stop smoking cigarettes or smoke less cigarettes and instead substitute cigarettes for food. So an unintended consequence of smoking laws is that it increases obesity. The analysis uses data from the Behavioural Risk Factor Surveillance System. This is a survey which is conducted by telephone interviews, and it contains a range of individuals along with information on their education, race and income. Now this data is appended with data from the number of fast food restaurants, the price of fast foods and the price of cigarettes, which come from other surveys. And in order to find if there's a relationship, they use something called regression analysis, with BMI and the probability of being obese as dependent variables. And on screen are the results. Now, as I noted previously, what they do is they run two regressions. with the dependent variable BMI and the dependent variable being obese, and they use all of these control variables noted on the left-hand side here. And on screen are some of the results from the regression analysis. Now, one thing to note is that the signs of the coefficients are very much in line with what's been found in other academic works on obesity. For example, if you're Black, Hispanic, or non-Hispanic, your probability of being obese and your BMI is higher than your white counterparts. For males, they found they have higher BMI, but a lower probability of being obese in comparison to females. If you're married or if you're widowed, you have both a higher BMI and a higher probability of being obese, whereas things like education and income are negatively correlated with BMI and the probability of being obese. When it comes to age is like an inverted U shape when it comes to BMI. BMI peaks at the age of 57, and the probability of being obese is also an inverted U shape, which peaks at 45. In terms of the key results, one of them is that a 10% increase in the number of restaurants increases the probability of being obese by 1.4 percentage points. And there's two different interpretations to this. One is that fast food restaurants are the key culprit. The other is that fast food restaurants are simply responding to the fact that people now have less time. They are simply meeting a demand. Another key result is that a 10% increase in the fast food price is associated with a 0.7 percentage point decrease in the percentage of people who are obese. Now, this is something we would expect, and it's something in line with neoclassical modelling, but one thing which the paper says in particular is that technological innovations and economies of scale have really begun to decrease the price of food. It's allowed big fast food restaurants to produce more food, push down the price of food, and therefore increase obesity. In one sense, the need to use technological innovation and economies of scale could be a response to the increased demand for fast food. The final key result is that a 10% increase in cigarette prices is associated with a 0.4 percentage point increase in the percentage obese. And this is an unintended consequence of things like federal tax hikes and increases in the duty on cigarettes. Another result is that clean indoor laws and smoking bans, they were found to have no direct role in determining weight outcomes. So what are the policy implications from this paper? Well, one thing to note is that fast food outlets already do face regulations and do pay a range of taxes associated with the fact that they do cause increases in obesity. But there's a question around whether or not these regulations have been strict enough and whether or not the taxes need to be raised. Does there, for example, need to be a limit on the number of fast food restaurants in a particular area? Does there need to be regulation around the minimum pricing of fast food? All of these things are very difficult to calculate. They're very difficult to ultimately split out the true cost that each fast food restaurant costs and how much each fast food restaurant is contributing to obesity. So to actually implement this kind of tax or any forms of regulations would be very difficult. For example, the extent to which, say, McDonald's contributes to obesity might be very different to the extent to which Subway does, and therefore you might need a set of different regulations and taxes for both companies, and both companies are very likely to face any regulations and any further taxes with incredible hostility. Now, cigarettes already do face taxes and regulations, but when they were set, it was very unlikely that they factored in the impact on obesity. They didn't realize, for example, that increasing taxes on cigarettes would increase obesity. So with that in mind, then when someone sets regulations and taxes on cigarette prices in the future, what they should bear in mind is that it will increase obesity as a negative side effect. If you found this useful, please give it a like and feel free to subscribe, and also let me know what you think in the comments below.